Hello and welcome. Today we will be covering Protea once again. Since I have already made a Protea build pretty recently, I will not be recovering her abilities, so do check out my previous video in the description if you want to find out more about her abilities. However, I will be talking about the differences I have made to this build, as it is not necessarily a new build but an upgraded version of my old build, and it is much better now. This idea to improve this build actually came from one of my clan members, so thank you very much to them. Now, let's get straight into what's changed and what actually is going on. So the story is, one of my clan members was asking for advice on how to build Protea, and I referred them to my video. Upon watching it, they liked my build, but thought that they could improve it by adding the Hurus-Karibo, which makes you go invisible. Now, this was a really smart idea, as the Hurus-Karibo's invisibility does break whenever you attack enemies with weapons, but Protea kills with an ability, and ability kills do not break the Hurus-Karibo. I'm gonna pronounce that wrong this entire video, so I apologize for that. Kubro's, so ability that kills do not break the Hurus-Karibo's, or the Shade's actually, invisibility. Hurus-Karibo is important over the Shade though, however, because I added it on top of this idea using the Mecha Mod Set, which is pretty self-explanatory. Honestly, this build isn't anything wild. It's a pretty kind of in-your-face build. Could have figured it out pretty easily, but what can you do? Basically, what does the Mecha Mod Set do? Well, that's a good question. Now, the Mecha Mod Set are 4 mods to go on the Kuburos, and they can only go on the Kuburos. They can't go on the Kavats or any other companion. The Kuburos do count as the Helminth charges and also the Protea as well though, so they can go on those as well. They don't have to go on the base Kuburos. And then another 2, including 1 Aura slot, that go on your Warframe. In addition to these mecha mods having a very powerful mod set effect, which I will cover in a second, they also have some pretty good burst effects as well. Mecha Recharge, which is one of the Kuburo's mods, gives the Kuburo a 90% shield recharge increase, which is pretty nice. Mecha Overdrive is less useful, but still a nice thing, as it will give your companion 60% of your primary weapon status chance added to the companion status chance, which is very nice, and it will also give the companion increased status duration. Now, you don't really use beast companions for DPS, so this isn't really that useful, but it's still a nice buff to have. The 2 that go on your Warframe are Mecha Pulse, which will give 60% armor for 20 seconds whenever you kill one of the marked enemies from the Mecha Mod Set, which I'll explain in a second. This can be a pretty good mod, can give you a decent amount of armor, but we obviously won't be using it, as we can be able to be invisible on Protea, and even if we weren't, Protea normally does shield tanking, so I'm actually leaving this mod unranked on my Protea build. And then finally, Mecha Empowered is the Aura slot that allows your entire squad to do plus 150 extra damage against the marked enemies. Now, this extra damage is multiplicative with all sources. It also double dips with status effects. And the double dip from Mecha Empowered is multiplicative to the double dip from faction damage. So you can have 2 double dip effects, which can create an extremely powerful status effect. Speaking of powerful status effect, this synergizes really well with the mod set of the mod set effect of the Mecha mods, which are every 15 seconds, if you're using all 4 Mecha mods, the companion will target and mark 1 enemy for 12 seconds. Killing that enemy will then spread the status effects on that enemy to all other enemies in a radius of 30 meters. Now, that is the effect. Those are the numbers that are given when you're using all 4 mods. If you are only using 1 mod, for example, it will be the companion will only target enemies every 60 seconds, they will only be targeted for 3 seconds, and the radius for the status effect spread will only be 7.5 meters. So obviously you want to be using all the mods. But I hope it doesn't take a lot of brains to figure out how powerful this mod set is, because it's basically melee influence. Except we're spreading an incredibly supercharged status effect, because 2 double dips from our faction damage and from Mecha Empowered have been placed on it, making it insanely powerful, making it just nuke entire rooms of 30 meters. It is a extremely powerful mod set, and I'm gonna show off right here. we can see this enemy right here has been targeted. I'm simply just going to cast my second ability twice, 3 times. I'm not even going to activate my fourth. That was without any armor strip. This time this enemy was marked. If we do that again, but we activate our fourth, so we add armor strip to the mix. Yeah. Now let's do that one more time, add in armor strip plus raw, which will give us a faction damage buff for our sentinels. And I'm just gonna cast 1 sentinel. See what happens. Just 1 torrent. Just 1. Against level 175 heavy gunners. Let's add the Steel Path modifier. Steel Path 175 corrupted heavy gunners. So yes, we are using raw on this build. Obviously we can't mod Protea's turrets, so we can't add faction damage onto the turrets. But raw is faction damage, and it gets applied to our abilities. So that will be applying a faction damage onto our turret, not only increasing the damage it does just outright, but then further increasing the damage the heat status effects from the turret does. Then in Mecha Empowered will be increasing that even more, and then spreading all that heat status effects to enemies in a whole room, making it do just a stupid amount of damage. And we Helminth off Protea's first ability because we used the first ability previously for our survivability, but since the Hurus Kubro will be making us invisible, we don't have to worry about survivability. Now, as you'll see in my video, I'm actually not invisible a lot of the time. That's because the Hurus Kurubo's invisibility works by making the player and itself invisible when enemies are within range. And because this build kills so fast, that enemies don't even get close enough to activate the invisibility for the Hurus Kubro. So I'm not even invisible half the time, and I don't have to worry about survivability because enemies are dead. It is just an unbelievable build. It sits around 200 kpm. That's 200 kills per minute. You only need 100 kills to manage life support without ever using the life support capsules, which is a lot of kills. 200 is a lot of kills per minute. So it is a very, very fun build and a very powerful build. So let's look at the build. We are using Multi-Augmented, which previously we couldn't use as we're using Arcane Aegis, which we no longer need. We don't need to worry about survivability. So we can get even more power strength now from Multi-Augmented, making the build do even more damage. Besides that, the build is the same. We just switched out our Aura to Mech Empowered, and we switched out Archon Vital for Mecha Pulse. The rest of the build should be exactly the same. We have our duration, we have our range to offset narrow-minded, we have our strength to offset overextended, the augment for the fourth ability, which will be armor stripping enemies, plus equilibrium plus primed flow. Now, real quickly, Protea is getting a new augment for her second ability. That will make her second ability follow her around whenever her fourth is activated, but only one of the turns. That is definitely a build that I'm going to try, but it is a different build. So this is a camping build setup, where once the augment gets released, I'm probably likely to be making another Protea build video, which will be using the new augment for a slightly different build, that instead of camping, it will be running around, kind of what you'd expect from Zaku. But this build is very good, and I wouldn't use it personally with the augment, as it's just a different type of build. It's a camping build instead of a run around build. For the Hurus Kubro, the build is very simple. We have Stalk, which is its ability to make us go invisible when enemies are within 24 meters. Then we have Mecha Recharge and Mecha Overdrive to give us those Mecha mods. Hunter Synergy and Tenacious Bond are for different builds that I use the same setup for, but they don't actually do anything on this build. You could replace both of them with 2 mods that would be more useful if you want, but I'm lazy and reuse companion builds on the same, on different Warframes, so that's why they're there. Tendon Bond, again, for the exact same reason. Fetch is of course a must-have. Momentum Bond will make the Hurus Kurubo respawn faster by killing Eximus units. Calculated redirection for the shields. You can use linked redirection, as depending on how your linked redirections rank, which you can see mine is pretty low ranked, and also the shields of your Warframe linked redirection might be better than calculated redirection, but in my case, Well, on Protea it's actually the exact same, but on other builds, calculated redirection is better for me. And then hastened deflection, which is basically fast redeflection, but for beasts. It increases our shield recharge, which is additive with mecha recharge, and then reduces our shield recharge delay. So we're doing a shield tank build for the Heroes Kubro. We don't have any health mods on this, but it's going to be invisible most of the match anyway, so it shouldn't have to worry that much about survivability. All the weapons are just our typical utility weapons I use. I have Amalgam Serration on whatever primary you want to use, Amalgam Barrel Diffusion on whatever secondary you want to use, and I use the Protos for this evolution right here, giving me sprint, speed, and slide, and this evolution right here giving me parkour velocity. The builds on the 3 weapons don't matter, we won't be using any of them, and the other perks for the Protos also don't matter. And the focus tree, use whatever you want. I'm using Xenoric, so when I get started in the mission, I'll be able to pop up my dispensary without having to drop an energy pad to set up my build and get all the energy I need. But if you want more power and strength for some reason, or casting speed, then Manta Ray would be your go-to. You can get knockback resistance for whatever reason, enemies don't get close enough to you. Yunaru would be your go-to, and then if you wanted survivability, again, I don't know why, you're invisible, you'd use Vazarin. Nemeron is useless though, it's not a melee build. Nemeron's only good for melee builds. It's amazing for the melee builds, but outside melee builds, it's basically useless. So use whatever focus skill you want based on the reasons I just gave you. I'm just using Xenoric so I can pop up my energy without needing an energy pad, but Xenoric isn't needed either. I just need it for the first dispensary drop, and then I never have to use it ever again. And then we have no Archon Shards at all for this build, as simply the build doesn't even need it. Of course, you can add whatever Archon Shards you might think you want, maybe more duration, maybe more strength, whatever you want to add, you can do it, but the build doesn't need it at all. So I'm leaving it blank. Anyway, that is all for me. If you enjoyed this video, please go check out some of my other videos, and until next time, bye bye.